America, the greatest country in the world. America prides itself on being a democracy, grounded on the principle that its citizens choose their leaders. However, throughout American history, politicians have found a loophole in the democratic system that gives them and their party an unfair advantage. This loophole is referred to as gerrymandering, named after the Massachusetts governor Elbridge Gerry, who manipulated the shape of a Senate election district to look like a salamander, as shown here. Now, gerrymandering is a topic that drives people crazy, but to many, what gerrymandering is may still be unknown. In this presentation, we will explain to you what gerrymandering is, its effects, and what needs to be done about it. Every 10 years, the federal government records the census. The information recorded in the census is what's used during reapportionment and redistricting time in Congress. Reapportionment is where the states find out how many seats they get in the House based on the state's population, and redistricting is the process of dividing up their states into however many districts they have. Note that the number of districts is equal to the state's number of representatives. This is where things start to get a little dicey, as there are only two rules pertaining to district drawing. One is that districts must be equal in population, and two, they must be contiguous, meaning that a district cannot be entirely separated by another district. This leads to oddly drawn districts, like Illinois' 4th District, where the only thing connecting its two sides is a small stretch of freeway. Anyway, districts are drawn by state legislators, which means whatever party is in power during this time gets to redraw the districts. This leads to a plethora of oddly shaped districts that are drawn to ensure that their party remains in power, at least until the next census year, and could dramatically misrepresent the population of that state. Take a look at the example presented here. Say the state has 50 people. 60% of those people are Democrats, 40% of them are Republicans. In an ideal world where districts are drawn fairly, 5 districts would be drawn with 3 blue districts and 2 red districts, an accurate representation of that state's population. However, a Democratic legislator could draw the districts, ensuring they win all 5 seats while their conservative counterparts take 0. On the contrary, Republicans could draw the lines in a way which benefits them, ensuring 3 Republican districts and 2 Democratic districts. Unfortunately, redistricting patterns have continuously mirrored the latter. Look at Pennsylvania, for instance, where in 2014, about half of Pennsylvanians voted for Democratic candidates, but Republicans took 13 of the 18 seats. The same is true in North Carolina and in Ohio, where about 40% of the people voted Democrat. However, 12 of Ohio's 16 seats, 75%, were represented by conservatives. Now, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Ohio aren't the only states that fall victim to gerrymandering. It happens all over the country. Just look at Michigan. Look at the shapes of those districts. It's stupid. Gerrymandered districts are essentially safe districts drawn to ensure victory for a specific party with little to no competition. Now, it's easy to pick on the GOP for cheating the system so bad as of late, causing them to send 33 more members to the House, even though Democrats got 1.1 million more votes nationwide. But the fact of the matter is that the GOP just so happened to be in power when it came time to redraw the districts. Liberals are by no means not guilty of gerrymandering. Look at Representative John Conyers, for example. Conyers was a Democrat, and he represented Detroit's district for 53 years. It would be safe to assume that Conyers' competition was minimal, considering he wasn't removed from office via a loss or by retirement, but rather by being involved in a sex scandal. By this point, I hope we've made it clear to see why gerrymandering is such a hot political topic of debate. Gerrymandering fundamentally undermines the democratic process by rendering citizens' votes meaningless in what are basically predetermined election outcomes. When referring to gerrymandering, often the question, do voters choose their politicians or do politicians choose their voters, is asked. The answer should be clear after seeing how politicians shamelessly draw congressional districts to ensure their party stays in power for as long as they can. And Americans are always frequently complaining about politicians not representing their views, and we raise to you, unless something gets done about gerrymandering, how can we expect anything to ever get better? If we continue to allow a system like gerrymandering to flourish, then the same corrupt, inept, and misrepresentative politicians will continue to get reelected, and our country will find itself self-perpetuating the same problem at hand. In 2012, both parties of Congress had a 15% approval rating, yet 90% of the House members were reelected that year. Courts have been reluctant to solve this issue, with the Constitution assigning power to each state to prescribe its own redistricting rules. Proponents would argue that it's simply human nature to join groups that reflect your own interest and identity. However, some states have made the push for nonpartisan groups to redraw the congressional districts in the hopes of seeing a more level playing field. But If the real power of America comes from the people, then it should be our civic duty to raise awareness about gerrymandering, donate to groups that push to end it, and just make our voices heard before things get too out of hand and the whole notion of our democracy implodes.